you have a lot of Asian influenced characters, backgrounds, cultures, world building in all of your work. So how does that come about for you? Like you told
Well,
us for
I've
Paul and Well, you have like the Japanese influence because of this kind of an incident. What about, say, for the Bone Witch?
well, I speak from with my background is basically I am a mutt. So I've got like I'm Ch- I I'm Chinese Filipino, but my ethnicity is actually all over the place. Like I'm Chinese, Filipino, Thai, Malay, Spanish, Mongolian, and so on. So that sort of influenced me as well. And I live in the Philippines, and the Philippines is a very conservative Catholic country, but at the same time I was raised with Buddhist culture, and all these like intersection of religion and culture sort of decided where I wanted to write that integration of culture into my works because that's how I experienced it. And when it came to things like the Bone Witch was actually my sort of depiction of a Philippines that was never, a optimistic view of the Philippines, that where they were never colonized, like they were never colonized by the Spaniards, they were never colonized by the Americans, and they were never occupied by the Japanese. So I was sort of thinking the progression of the Philippines at that without those sort of colonization would be influences from Middle Eastern culture. So that's where I went with. And when it came to things like the Asha, for example, um, the whole concept of the Bone Witch was actually based on this kind of Filipino witch called the Mangkukulam. And the Mangkukulam basically is a fixture in a lot of like Philippine pre-colonial society. And they were they were the healers, but at the same time they were also the people who you went to if you wanted to inflict curses on somebody else. So they had this dual sort of profession in society. And the way people in my books treated bone witches, like they feared them, but at the same time they really needed them for help with a lot of aspects in society. That was the same with Mangkukulams because people feared them, but at the same time they acknowledged that, hey, yeah, if I'm hurt or like I've got somebody somebody's put a curse on me, I really need to go to you. Like I have no choice. I might fear you, but I still need you. So that was that whole thing I wanted going with the Bone Witch. Like that weird duality of being feared but at the same time being needed.
So, like, your latest book, Wicked as You Wish, on came out in March 2020. So, how has
Yes.
COVID been for you, as an author? Like, you have a book come out and then, oh, pandemic, oh,
Lockdown.
lockdown.
Oh yeah, that was very very hard because that was a really wild week for me, mainly because like the last week of February was weird because I I was actually involved in briefly in like a shootout here. Um and it's
Okay.
not, I mean, the Philippines don't usually have like these shootout things like what you hear in America. So it's not a shootout where people were just randomly shooting at people. It was a shootout in that there was this employee who was really mad because he wasn't paid in a while, and he didn't have enough money like for food and stuff. And so he went to the mall where he was formerly employed at, and he held up held up the managers there, and we were sort of caught in the crossfire, and there were I mean we were able to get out very quickly, but that thing dragged on for like another day before he finally like turned himself in. And then 2 days after that, the first major case of COVID happened in that same mall. So I had to self isolate, and that was also when my book came out. And at like a day or so after my book came out, I think there was that whole general quarantine with the US as well, because the US started getting all those like high profile COVID cases. Like New York especially was getting hit really really bad. So so my publisher was really quick. They came to me and said, well, you know what, this is not, I don't think we're gonna be able to do much with this. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna sort of tone down the promotions and everything for this year, and we're gonna restart next year, where we feel like things would be would be under under control. And I guess they were hoping, a change of presidency would help a lot, and I guess it did. So they said, you know what, we're gonna target 2021 as the year where we're gonna restart, jumpstart the promotions and restart everything else. So that's where we are right now. Actually, Wicked as we have a lot of things planned actually for Wicked as You Wish, including a new cover for the paperback that's gonna come out. And
Ooh.
unfortunately, the second book, which was supposed to be out this year, they've decided to kind of push it back until next year, again because of everything that's happened. And I think they had some cases there at the publishing company as well. So that was a very wild 2 weeks of like unexpected news after unexpected news. And of course there was that fear, like I wasn't really concentrating much on the book because I was self isolating, and I was very worried that I could have caught it, because the cases that was announced in that mall where I was, um, and right after the shootout, so everybody was gathered in one place, and we were worried, like, oh my gosh, all of us, the possibility of that that whole area getting infected was very real likely possibility. And in last year we had COVID COVID in the family, and uh, like family friends that didn't make it. So it was very rough for 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 my family. And you know, looking back, I feel really fortunate that I didn't get anything, and my my publishers were so nice that they were willing to push with promotions, do as much as they can to help promote the book in spite of everything happening. So I still feel pretty lucky. It's just that, I didn't get a lot of PR for the book. Like none of my book got PR last year. So they're hoping everything just restarts this year, and we're hoping for the best.
I'm hoping for the best too. I'm heartbroken. I was waiting for part two. Now I have to wait more.
Yeah, I read Wicked as You Wish, and now I'm also waiting for part two. But I think I mean, since I just read it, I'm happy to wait for a while, let the story sink in because it's quite heavy, you know. Um, and before we get into the details of the story, I'm going to run out of time on Zoom very soon. So can I please ask you to rejoin?
Okay.
Okay, people, we'll be back in 2 minutes. Dum, da-dum, dum. If you have any questions for Rin, you can put it in the live chat and we'll ask her.
Okay, I'm back.
Back.
All right, great. So, what we did was I read Wicked as You Wish, Paullomi read the first book of the Bone Witch Trilogy, and Sanchi has read almost all your works. So, we wanted to ask a few personalized questions about your series. And so we'll start with Sanchi's questions for Girl in the Well.
Okay, so before starting, I'd like to tell everyone how I basically find the books that I read. So a lot of people will go on Goodreads and look for books but I've never been okay with going on Goodreads and just searching for things. So the first book of yours that I read was The Bone Witch, but then I came across The Girl from the Well much later because I go via genres. So, and I came across it after 2 years. And after reading it, I was so surprised because the themes and everything was very different. Same author, but like really different and versatile writing. And in The Girl from the Well, Ukiko is such an enigmatic character. Like, she's a ghost and she's an avenger for a lack of a better word. And so as you told us in the beginning that you yourself were kind of like the inspiration for the character. So how did you chance upon this particular legend, and how much of the world building was like how much of it is from Japanese myth and how much of it is from what you put in yourself in the story?
Oh, well, okay. I really really love horror stories. Like I mentioned that I wanted to be a writer when I was 6 or 7 years old, and the reason I wanted to be a writer when I was 6 and 7 was because I was in love with Stephen King books. Like I was reading Stephen King books when I was 6 and 7 years old, and I didn't necessarily understand everything, but I really really loved like that horror aesthetic, that horror atmosphere. So I really loved ghost stories. Like that was what I usually collected. My favorite book as a kid was Are You Afraid of the Dark? And Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which is that cool book with all those grotesque illustrations and those creepy drawings. That was my absolute favorite book when I was growing up. Um I so I was very immersed in a lot of legends and mythologies and basically anything about ghost stories, and I got the the Girl from the Well. A lot of people usually think that, hey, it's based on The Ring or it's based on The Grudge because that's the one that they're most familiar with. So they usually think that The Girl from the Well is inspired by The Ring, and in a way it is, but I was actually inspired by the legend that inspired The Ring and The Grudge as well. It's called the Bancho Sarayashiki, and or the AKA the legend, like the legend of the nine fates. So it's basically this girl who was tasked with guarding these expensive 10 fates, and a for like a lord of the castle, and his retainer wanted her. So he tried to get her into trouble because she was spurning his advances. So he stole one of the plates, and then he told the Lord that, hey, she stole it. So when she was confronted, she proclaimed her innocence, but nobody believed her because she was like just a servant girl. And in the end, the retainer goes, well, I will protect you if you agree to my advances. And she still says no. And he got mad and he murdered her and threw her in the well. But since it's a ghost story, the following night she rises from the well as a ghost, and she goes to that collection where the plates were supposed to be, and she starts counting. When she reaches the number 9 and she realizes that one plate is missing because it's supposed to be 10 plates, she starts screaming and like generally causing chaos. And that happens every night. So that's where the whole legend comes from. A girl who climbs out of the well looking for a missing plate that she was accused of stealing in life. And if you since you've read The Girl from the Well, that's why the number 9 is such an important number in that book, and why she goes bananas, absolutely bananas, when she hears the number 9, because that causes so much trauma for her. So in that aspect, I tried to follow the history, the legend to the letter. But you know I mean, a lot of Asian ghost stories, especially Japanese ghost stories, they don't usually have a lot of agency, these ghosts. Like female ghosts don't get a lot of agency at all. And the stories don't usually end with any redemption or any real avenging on their ends. Because, it's usually the perpetrators who get away with it. So I wanted to put my own subversion on that and say, well, what if she did? Like, what if she was successful? And you know, after she was able to seek her revenge on the person who was responsible for her death, why not take that a step further? Why not instill in her this vicious sort of vengeance where she wants to do the same to every other murderer, every other criminal that whose crimes are very close to what happened to her. So I just sort of took that story and tried to make it more feminist, in that I wanted the girl this time to have the agency. I wanted the girl to, relish in being powerful for a change, despite her history and despite what happened to her. So, I mean, when you live in a place like the Philippines where there's a lot of violence and not a lot of justice, definitely not a lot of mercy, it's easy to think, the idea of vigilantism is very appealing. That notion that if justice can't be served through the legal ways, there should be some kind of, some other kind of justice where you feel vindicated, where there's some kind of vindication involved, where perpetrators get the punishment that they deserve. And coming from this kind of background, that's what I guess that's what sort of inspired me to turn a turn something that most people would fear, like a vengeful ghost, like the way they portray Sadako in The Ring and Kayako in The Grudge, or Samara in like the American version of The Ring, and take that a step further and make her a sort of tragic figure, but also somebody that you can cheer and somebody that you can support, and you can understand why she's doing these things, even though it's not necessarily, you know, what most people would consider the right thing to do, but it is the right thing for her to do. And, I like doing subversions. I love subverting like set tropes and set legends and spinning it so that I can find there's more meaning to it. So hopefully that's what I wanted to do with The Girl from the Well. And I hope that's what got across when I wrote, when people read the book.
It did actually. That's what surprised me a lot about this whole series, was that the ghost is badass, and the ghost has so much agency, and the ghost is kind of Batman, but not Batman.
Yeah,
And yeah, Ashwini.
sorry, I was just remarking that, this justice system that you were talking about, that even if you don't get it in, even if the law does not help you, you still get justice. I think in India we just call that karma. And we, We just hope it works out.
Yeah, but the
Yeah,
difference in this case is that, she goes ahead and she just avenges everything. And I really love the climax of the first book because, no spoilers for the audience, but because of the number nine. You know how they used that condition to, like, in the climax. I don't want to say more, it'll become a spoiler.
Well, thank you.
Another great theme that I've seen in this series is the one of family. Family bonds are emphasized upon, like Tark's mother and then her relationship with her sister, and Tark and his cousin. So, like, is this something that comes from, like, your personal background about what you culturally have seen as a family? Because we these kind of bonds are not usually spoken about so much in a lot of other people's books, and it's something we see in the Bone Witch as well, right? The devotion between siblings and family. So is this something that you like to write about in all your books? Because it's there. I mean, I'm not sure about Never Tilting World, but everything else, yes.
Well, the Never Tilting World actually has twin sisters. So yeah, the
No
bond
spoilers.
without saying any spoilers, like there are the main characters are twin sisters, and it's part of like the synopsis anyway. So I think it won't be spoilers if I say it. It's basically these twin girls who were separated by catastrophe. Their world was literally split into two, and they were into a permanent night and a permanent day, and they were split into opposite ends of the world. And the whole point of the book was them trying to trying to find a way to heal the world without knowing that the other one is still alive. So, and now that you mentioned it, yeah, like family is really important in most of my books, if not, I guess probably all of them. And maybe I think it's mainly inspired because, you know, my family isn't big. Like even our extended family isn't that big. But I have a lot of cousins, and we are all very like really really close to each other to the point that I consider them siblings rather than cousins. So the it's really something that I grew up with, and I think I was fortunate to have grown up with the support of family and close friendship with cousins, and that really helps when it comes to writing books with family because I can just base it on my own experiences. Like a lot of the banter between Tark and Callie is very reminiscent of my banter with a lot of my cousins. It has that same, that same snappy comebacks. It has that same cadence, that same, sarcastic, uh, you know, sarcastic jokes, sarcastic, comeuppances, but all in jest. So I think, when I write books about family in particular, my mind really just goes back to them, and it makes it easier to write because I just think about the time I spent with them, and that's all I need. Easy to write.
Happy New Year, by the way.
Yeah,
oh
happy
yeah.
Chinese New Year.
Happy Chinese New
Oh,
Year.
Happy New Year.
So,
Yeah, coming
sorry.
back to the, yeah, yeah, go Ashwin.
No, sorry. I was just going to say that we got a question on the live chat.
Oh,
Steph asks, what or who are some of your creative inspirations for your work?
When you say creative inspiration, is that like other authors that I look up to? I'm gonna assume that that's the case, right?
I think
I
Okay.
because it's
guess, yeah.
Steph, I think because it's Steph, it can also mean movies. So authors and movies and films, yeah.
Anything in your childhood that you loved that inspired you to write like this or create a world
Okay.
like this in your series?
Uh, well, I think I'm known for writing things like horror and fantasy, but not a lot of people really think about. the fact that I write a lot of comedy in those works as well. They're usually overshadowed by the horror and the fantasy, but I do like humor. Like as much as I can, I love instilling a little bit of humor in my books. Like I guess the personality of Tark in particular from The Girl from the Well, that's very clear to see because it's just me talking sass, basically. That's Tark as well. And if from humor, I really love a lot of comedians, and George Carlin and Conan O'Brien were my two favorites growing up. Conan O'Brien was basically my babysitter because, when my parents are asleep, I'd sneak out and open the TV, and then there's late night with Conan O'Brien, and I just watch that. So he really inspired my humor, especially that the sort of self-deprecation that he loves to use in his comedy routine. So that's one. And I mean, now that you say it, I have there was this one author that I super looked up to, and I also credit him as being one of the biggest reasons why I am an author today, because he's a really popular author. I love his work, and out of the blue, he just announces, "Hey, I am going to sponsor a writing contest here in the Philippines. I'm gonna give a really big cash prizes because I want you all to like show off your best work and I want to read it." So I did. Like this was considering I've never really I mean, I say I love to write, but I've until that point I've never actually finished a book. Like I've written so many chapters and everything, but for some reason I never seem able to finish a book. And when that contest came, I wrote my first ever short story, first ever completed short story, and I submitted that. And I was one of the winners.
Wow.
So happy.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the prizes, other than the cash prize, was a dinner with him. So, it was a chance for me to like pick his brain and stuff. So we go to the dinner and I'm telling him, in the Philippines, writing is not actually a lucrative business. Like even journalists need side jobs because writing alone can't give them what they need to pay their daily expenses in the Philippines. Because writing doesn't feel like, people don't really seem to think that writing is that important here, especially writing fiction. And I tell him all this, and then he looks me in the eye and he goes, "You know what? That's bollocks. You are a writer, so you will write." And I really took that to heart. Like, here's this really super popular author, and I only have one short story to my name, and he has this unwavering belief in me. So that was the day I said, you know what, I'm gonna quit my job eventually. I'm gonna save enough to quit my job, and then I'm gonna really focus on this writing thing and see if I can get something out of it. And I did. So, thank you, Neil Gaiman, because Neil Gaiman was
Aww.
the one who
Wow.
sponsored that. And yeah, I have so many pictures of me hugging him. I was so fangirly giddy. So fangirl,
That's
fanboyishly giddy.
that's
I
very
am
sweet.
mind blown.
That's normal. That's
I
normal.
mean, that that kind of popular author having faith in it, it's inspiring and it's humbling, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking, you know what, let's not I don't want to let him down. If he thinks I'm good enough, then I should think I'm good enough too. And that's what I did.
Wow. That's a big life lesson right there.
It was a life-changing experience for me. I think that's where I
Yeah.
got the confidence to like really push through with it.
Mm-hmm.
I met
So
Lang Lee once. She's a poet. So she came to my area and she got like all her poetry books and I couldn't say a word. I was like, I like your work, I like your work. She's like, thanks. It's like crazy. Just shut up. Because you kind of freak out when you're looking at someone whose work you really love and you're just like, what do I say?
Yeah. Coming back to the girl in the well, because I still have like one very interesting question left. And that is a really simple one. Are we going to see Okiko again ever in your writing?
Oh, oh, well, that is really dependent on my publisher. So, I mean, it's not like I can go to a different publisher and say, well, here's a book that I've written from a different publisher that I'd like you to publish. And, I've got a bit of book cred now, but that's not going to fly either. So, as of now, there isn't really any plans for a third book. But that being said, I am not turning down any opportunity if such would arise to write more books about Tark and Okiku.
I
Yeah.
have hope in life.
Never say never, right?
So now that we have done Girl from the Well, it's time for the Bone Witch. Up to you, Paullomi.
Oh, come on. I won't need a bit of it. You should come into. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, sure. You ask, I ask. I have a lot of weird questions about the Bone Witch, but
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So usually whenever I read books, first thing if I see a map, I freak out because that means that's a lot of planning that has gone into it. Because I think last when I went crazy over a map was Narnia and Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. When you see such a world come together, it's serious business. The authors put a lot of thought behind each and every area, how people are segregated into villages and palaces and all. So how does it work for you? How do you build that map? Like, how does it work? The series of Bone, which is completely different than your first series. So how did it come together?
Well, uh, you know what? That's something I actually can't really put very well into words when it comes to explaining how I actually came up with the map and with the world building. Because the weird thing about me is that I can do a lot of it in my head. Like, and I can plot everything in my head. I don't always need to write everything down, and it it makes much more sense in my head, actually, for me, than writing things down. Because when I write things down, there's a sort of limitation to the paper where you can't really mind map the whole thing at 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 a glance. But I could do it very easily in my head. Like, there's like a weird filing cabinet in my head, and if I want I want like a certain set of information, I can just reach into one drawer and pull it out. And you can't really do that when the words are, when you're planning everything out on paper. So, like, the best description I could give when it comes to things like that is, I start very, very basic. Like, you know, I think about how many kingdoms are here. Okay, fine, 8 kingdoms. Then I go through each one of them, like, what's their geography, what's their history, what is their history in connection with the other kingdoms? Are they are they friendly with their neighbors? Are they enemies with their neighbors? What is their religion? What is their philosophies? What's their culture? Do the cultures, and then from there I start, you know, taking a step back, see like the macro version of it, which is basically, do the cultures influence each other? Like, do kingdoms influence each other? What is their overall objective? Does one kingdom want war? Does one kingdom just want trade? Does one kingdom just want to be left alone? So, it gradually builds in my head. I don't really have to put much down on paper. I just let it percolate in my head for maybe a month. Like, every day I think a little bit more about it. And once I've got certain ideas set in stone, I just file it away. until, a month later, I look back and there's that whole place mapped out in my head. So I'm not sure why I'm like this. It's just, it's something that comes to me easily, and I do think that it is an advantage because it's easy to, when you carry all that information in your head and you find it easy to carry all that information, it's easy to write them down once you're finally starting to go into those chapters, because your reference point, like, if I want to write about Odalia, for example, which is one of the kingdoms in the Bone Witch, I just think about it and focus on all the information that I already settled on regarding Odalia. Then I just think about it, then I write it down. So I would suck so much when it comes to actually teaching those aspects of world building, because I understand that not a lot of people do that in that way.
This is good. This is good.
So
This is good.
I think it's a more of a top bottom sort of approach, right? You start with the
Hmm.
main things you have in mind and then you keep going down
Yeah, yeah.
till the time you
yeah.
reach. Yeah, I
And
mean,
I have like three
that's good.
follow-up questions to this now.
Yeah.
So fantasy worlds, unlike our real world, don't have timelines, right? So if
Hmm.
I have a world set in 1920s, I have to adhere to the clothing in 1920s or how it would look forward, coming forward. Like, so how do you decide on your characters or the people's clothing, their accents, maybe, or the way the jewelry is done, or yeah, that's one. And another would be like, since we're all such fantasy kids, we've all followed J.K. Rowling for a while. So she has a habit of explaining how she makes names or words or, you know, the curses, right? So the names in your books are really interesting too. So how do you come up with the names? Because Asha for us in Hindi means hope, right? So we try to connect it with language. So how does it match with you for culture, your background, and the timelines, everything all together? It's a very wide question.
Well, my version of Asha means truth. And um, when it came to the Bone Witch in particular, it was very heavily inspired by Zoroastrianism. And, like as I mentioned, mythology is a really, it's one of my favorite things to read about mythology. So I'm very fascinated by the whole religion and philosophy that surrounds Astro-Zoroastrianism. And the Deva actually was also based on those aspects. Like there are 8 sort of creatures that's evil, that the light must triumph against. And I thought it would be a nice subversion for somebody who would be considered evil in their society to be the one able to control that evil for good. So, mm, I when it comes to world building, I try to focus on the culture that I am already familiar with, and then try my best to come up with different versions of that culture so that each version just looks really different from each other. And when like I said, when you have that background that I do, like coming from a lot of different ethnicities and different cultures, it's easy to sort of look through those and find the one that resonates the most with you, and then try to adapt and integrate it into the culture you're trying to build. So, I mean, if there's any writers here who would be curious as to how I would world build, I do recommend like going with the things that you do know. Like, there is a reason why that writing advice, write what you know, is particularly beneficial, because writing what you know requires not doesn't require as much research, since you already come into it knowing what the intentions of that culture or that philosophy or that religion you want to write about. And I think that the the challenge when it comes to writing what you know is trying to turn it into different, make it so varied, so that you're writing that same culture but you're writing it with a different spin, you're writing it with a different subversion, so that none of that none of those versions that you're writing actually sounds the same, like none of them looks the same when you put them together. So I could write Filipino culture in so many different ways, and when I put it down in different book series, they don't look alike at all, but aspects of it are similar. Like in Filipino culture, as as mentioned already before, it's really family oriented. So I guess that's also the reason why a lot of my books are family oriented, because that comes from my culture. But when I write them down in different series, they feel different and they look different. And it's because I am so well versed in that culture that I can take I understand the different aspects of those cultures and those philosophies, and make sure that I focus on. It's a bit hard to explain, but like for example with The Girl from the Well, it's about cousins, family with cousins. But with Wicked As You Wish, it's about found family. It's not necessarily there is a lot of love between my main characters and their biological families, but there is a lot of love with them and their friends who eventually becomes family. So, it's similar to that. It's similar to that.
That's our sister.
say hi say hi to her for me.
Yes,
um
true.
it, taking something like family and learning and being able to focus on different aspects of what family is, I think is something that every writer should know. Like when you if you're good at something, or if you're knowledgeable about something, always it's always like a huge advantage if you can sort of isolate the aspects of that knowledge and learn how to diffuse it into different like spectrums, so that you're able to write them differently each time. I mean, that's the closest I can make to trying to explain that. It's so much easier when it's in my head than explaining it.
Yeah, but I think I got it. I think I got it somewhere. And now the word deva actually makes a lot of sense to me, because the moment you said Zoroastrianism, right? Like it just made sense to me, because it's related a little to Sanskrit and a little to Indian culture, in that there is a little subversion, right? So like in Iranian culture, old Iran, then the devas were the evil ones and the asuras were the light, right? It's the
Yes.
opposite in Indian cultures. The asurs are the this, and the dev is God. So
Oh.
yeah, that's interesting, because it comes from like Proto-Indo-European, and it trickles down from there. So that's how the word has split, and lots of things weird.
Well, that's awesome to know.
Yeah, so like the first time when I read the book, I was like, oh, the dev is evil, and now it makes sense. So that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, Paullomi. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So, more on this, I expected it to be really dark since the first thing I read was necromancy, and I was like, okay, she's gonna bring everyone back to life, and it's gonna be uh, like a Walking Dead sort of scene, but you still managed to make it pretty kid friendly. It's still really nice. I mean, there are really nice quotes which I actually underlined one I really liked. Ah, okay. If there is one thing people desire more than a good story, it is when they speak their own. I always had this situation with my friends where they were like, "You're the good person in your own story," but for them, you're the villain in their story.
Or
Your
you're the
same
supporting
situation.
character, the side
Yeah.
character in the story. And even if like you're friends with somebody, when you tell the same story, based on the same, like, if both of you tell the same story, it's gonna be different because you're gonna have different experiences. So that's
Yeah.
sort of what the quote means. Like, you can't, nobody else can tell your story but you.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of quotes in the book that actually makes me feel like connected to real life more than the fantasy world. And I wanted to ask, like, I think last I saw was, in Hercules, the live action movie, the strings attached to them. So it's like a physical appearance that, they're connected for souls for life in a way that you've put the hard glass as a
Yes.
physical proof of people's emotions. So they don't have the privacy of how they feel because Asha can figure out what they're feeling at that moment. So, what made you bring that particular trait out as the main thing in the book of the Bone Witch?
Well, you see, that again comes from, you know my culture. As I mentioned before, I mostly identify as Chinese Filipino. And if you're familiar with like Filipino families and Filipino households, you will know very early on that we do not have privacy. Like, we we meddle in each other out of concern for each other. Like, not because, I mean, partly because we're inquisitive, but also partly because we want to make sure that people are doing all right, like our loved ones, our families doing okay. So they ask and they meddle and they make sure that you're eating well and everything, everything that comes with that a Filipino family. And going into that is also my, like, aspects of my Chinese culture, because in Chinese culture there is this concept called the red string of fate. And with this red string of fate, it's more like, well, according to that sort of mythology that surrounds the red string of fate, your soulmate, or the one that you love, will be known to you because there's an invisible string tied to your finger, and
Yeah.
your soulmate will have an invisible string tied to their finger, connecting the both of you. And that ties in very closely with like concepts of fate and destiny. So I drew on those two in particular, like, lovable Filipino family, and then bed string of fate, to sort of incorporate that into the heart share, in the heart sharing roots, where in the book, for everybody else who hasn't read the book yet, heart share runes are these sort of magic spells where somebody can cast it on somebody else, and they can feel each other's emotions, they can feel each other's thoughts to a certain extent, and you know give strength to the other person if the other person is injured or weak. So it's sort of, again, my experiences with being Filipino, where you know it, Filipino families really love to support each other, even though they're nosy and meddling meddling. And in the book, that's also one of the problems that come up. Like, just because we've shared we've shared these we've shared hearts, doesn't necessarily mean that I want everything about myself to be known to you. And in to a certain extent, that is also the bond between my main character Thea and her brother Fox, because when she raises him from the dead, she acquires his thoughts as well, and he acquires hers. So it's been a cause of it's been a cause for friction. Oh, should we
Yeah,
um
sorry. Can I
yeah,
ask you to rejoin,
yeah,
please?
no problem. I'll come back.
Okay, we will be back in 2 minutes. Zoom is annoying, no? You have to, unless you pay for Pro, which obviously I wouldn't do because I'm a miser. But if you have any questions, please ask in the live chat. And we are back.
Okay.
Yes, please go ahead, Ren. I'm
Okay.
so sorry to
Um
interrupt you.
oh no, no problem. So basically Thea and her brother Fox has that bond where they can read each other's thoughts and feel each other's feelings, and is that causes friction throughout the book. Like at first they're thrilled that hey, I know what you're thinking, but later on when they start living their own like separate lives, they find out that it's very annoying and very frustrating to have your brother in your head when, like, for example, you're making out with your girlfriend or your boyfriend and they're right there able to feel or sense everything that you're doing. And there's cause for embarrassment, but later on the problems get a lot more serious than that, where it comes to the point where it tears them apart. So it really I really wanted to emphasize that family isn't always about sharing the good times. It's weathering through the bad times as well. And even though you might not always be happy with them, like you can get mad, you might be mad at them, or you'll have problems with them. It's the it's your bond with them that makes you both stronger, whether or not you want it to. So that's the whole concept of that heart sharing rule. Like if you want to be family, if you want to be, if you want to share things with your loved one, you have to take the good with the bad.
I mean, Thea's journey is quite tough, right? She's like a kid, a teenager who learns to stay on her own. And there was another quote, I think: when people cut us, we are expected to do only two things: smile and bleed. That's one of the most famous ones, I think, from the book. Wait, why does it sound so sad? What happened?
Well, I think when it comes to Thea, like she at first she's really curious and very interested in knowing the world beyond her village. And to do that, she has to be a bone witch. And that means stepping into unfamiliar territory with her. And she wants to be more than just a girl in her village, but at the same time, she resents the fact that though she gives so much of her abilities to the people in the kingdoms, there's still that alienation that they give her. Like you're you can help us, but you're still not good enough. That sort of that constant that constant statement that she feels like she gets from the people, especially with her superiors, especially with the people in the other Asha who are supposed to be supporting her, but do not, because they look at her mainly as a weapon that will eventually, that will eventually use up her strength and die. So she's basically pushing back against that narrative and trying to forge her own destiny. And she realizes very early on that it's going to take a lot of blood and it's going to take a lot of tears, as it eventually does happen. And so, that quote, I think, really, really sums up what how she feels being an Asha is. and it also leads to her sort of determination to go past what they're expecting of her, which is to keep controlling these monsters, these deva, until the day she dies, and to make more out of her life than what they want her to, and be somebody that she wants to be instead of what they expect her to be. So that sort of encompasses, that quote sort of encompasses her whole being, her whole perception of being an Asha.
Really strong. God.
So, like you said, that this is the series has a really wonderful message that I haven't seen very often in fiction. That is that all can't be free if some are in chains. You know, I thought
Yes.
that was wonderful, really, and
Thank
the
you.
other side of it also, that the end does not justify the means. I'm
Mm.
talking about the faceless, but yeah, you can't say much without giving spoilers, right? It's like you're walking on a tightrope trying to
When you
explain.
start writing, you realize how hard it is to make such strong statements in one line. Like, it's really tough. I mean, I'm imagining her going over that same line over and over again to make him have all that emotion. It's quite difficult. Hats off to you.
Well, I mean, I do want to say, like, when Shadow Glass came out, the last book in the trilogy, the Shadow Glass, when it came out, that for like 2 months after that, I was inundated with so many emails and so many like DMs in my Twitter account of people yelling at me. How could you, like,
The
because they,
end!
they,
Oh
they
my
read the
god!
ending, and it's like,
No,
and I was really
for the
shocked.
record,
Like,
for the record, I would like to say that I loved the ending. I loved it.
She's crazy.
I was really shocked because I wasn't actually, I didn't really think much about the ending when I was writing it, and I figured it just felt right. It felt like this was a fitting ending, but I wasn't expecting this much, like, people screaming at me, how could you, and also what happened, and also like, tell me more. I can't really say, I can't be too specific about it without it being spoilers,
I
but
haven't
people
read
were
it.
legit. Yes.
Like, I haven't read it, but I went through the reviews on Goodreads and I can only see people screaming the ending, the ending, the ending.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, like you said, that it felt right, and it did feel right, right? Like when you read the book, it's really coherent, and you can kind of understand where Tia is coming from and why she's doing what she's doing. Yeah, it's just that people have this notion, of what a happy ending should look like. I mean, in the circumstances, I could say that that was the happiest ending they could achieve to. And also, I know there is like a open thread at the end of the book. You know,
Yes, yes, it is.
sons with your voice, daughters with my eyes. Yes, I know.
Well,
And
when I before I even finished writing the first book, I already knew how to end it. Like, that was the ending in my mind when I wasn't even done with the first book yet. And in the first book, I already had to deal with, like, a lesser amount of people, but still a lot of people yelling at me about the ending of the first book. Like, really, really, oh my gosh! Again, I can't really be specific because spoilers, but
No, please don't. I want to read it.
Now she's
you
but
going to
you
read
go
know,
those
right
books
now
then.
and she's
Read
going to read
it.
it.
but that, like, that the trilogy, like, the final ending of the trilogy, I was really shocked. Like, so many people reacted so strongly to it, and not, when I say that they yell at me, it's not angry yell, it's more like emotional yell.
Yeah.
It's not like they're necessarily mad at me, they just want to vent, and I was the most likely person to vent at. And then I really appreciate it, actually, like, it getting that much reaction just means I did it right.
Indeed.
the ending seemed like it was built up to, like it was actually thought about, and and it shows. So when you said you knew at the end of book one, I'm like, oh yes, built up to. And if this series has, okay, so I'm not a person who really likes romance in anything, not even as a genre, but I feel that the romances in this book were done really very well. Like,
Thank you.
Tia and I won't say who, and Fox and I won't say who.
Thank
And
you.
another cool thing in the book series was the LGBTQ representation. You know,
Mm.
Zoya, Lick.
Lick was actually based on a friend.
Oh,
She is she is she is, I mean, in the Philippines it's very hard to come out. Like, basically, it's easy to come out on its own. Like, just coming out is fine. But when it comes to, you know, having laws that actually enforce that protections, we don't have that. Like, we don't even have divorce laws here in the Philippines. We are the only country in the world that do not have divorce laws. Like Vatican, Italy has divorce laws. We don't. That is how conservative we are. So, you know, LGBTQ is not, they're, to a certain extent, they're welcomed only if it does not disrupt the status quo. That's that sort of welcome that happens here. And I am non-binary, and people here don't even know what non-binary is. Like, they ask me if it's a computer program or something, and it is rough because every person you have to explain things to. Like, you don't feel, you're not confined by the laws of gender laws that are the status quo, especially here, again, because we are a conservative Catholic country. So it's extremely brave, I think, for people to choose to come out. Although in the Philippines, coming out is not actually a thing for most people. You just be. Like, we don't really look at labels. We just, if you if you're gay, you don't have to tell people you're gay. You're just gay. That's the sort of mindset we have here. And I did tell her, like, her name was her name's Lisa. So I tried to sort of fit, like, as I'm trying to make like a fantasy version of your name. And in Tagalog there's this word called likha, and it's a very pretty word. It's sort of like this, it's hard to translate, but it denotes this sort of wistfulness, like that sense of wistfulness and sort of beauty. And I wanted to take it and sort of twist it so that it's a different name all on its own, and also based it on my friend Lisa. So that's where I came up with Lit. It's Likh. That's her name, and Likha is spelled Likha. So, most Filipinos who read the book, once they see that name, they're like, "Oh, I know what this means." So that's that sort of Easter egg that I've hidden for other Filipinos to find. And that thing that, hey, she's a Filipina trans girl. That's that hidden sort of thing that I put in. And I'm very glad because a lot of Filipinos do email me and say, "Hey, I know this word, I know this name."
so that was the Bone Witch. Anything else we say will be spoilers. So now it's the turn for Wicked as You Wish. Go for it, Ashwini.
Yeah, I personally had a lot of fun reading Wicked as You Wish, and generally, I'm not the sort of person who would go for young adult fantasies, but I genuinely enjoyed it. And one thing I actually liked about it, at least to where I read, was that the romance was never explicit, which made me personally very happy because I'm the sort of person who will close my eyes when there's a kissing scene on TV. So that was very nice. But coming back to my questions, I feel like you were giving some hints in the book, and I might be completely wrong. Please correct me. For example, is King Models Donald Trump?
I wasn't giving a hint. I was being very, very explicit. He is.
Awesome.
Oh my god. Bullseye.
Like my whole thing, because I was Wicked as You Wish was actually the first book I ever completed. I wrote this way before The Girl from the Well. But
Oh.
the thing was, you know, a lot of the agents who liked that book, when I was looking for an agent, a lot of the agents who liked that book emailed me back and goes, well, I really, really like this, but can you make the main character white? And I am like,
Oh.
no. I
Hmm.
actually, like, I was desperate enough that I was considering it actually at that point because I really, really wanted to be published. But at the end, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna shelve this and wait for a time where it is more feasible for me to bring it out again and shop it around. So I shelved that and I started working on The Girl from the Well, and that was the first book that I sold. Um, with Wicked as You Wish, though, yeah, that was when I wrote that. I was really, really young. Like that was, I think you can tell from the humor in that book that is a lot more prominent when compared to the other later
Yeah,
books that
and
I've.
it's really raspy. It's very dry. I really enjoyed it a lot.
That
I
is that
cannot
was the
I
Conan
cannot
O'Brien influence.
I cannot get it out of my mind, that uh the main character's father in a Scottish accent telling the fire, but you are an absolute unit.
Yeah, that was
um
another question I had actually. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, I mean go ahead.
No, I mean, since Sanchi mentioned Scottish, I was very curious as to why Kay was Scottish.
Oh no, I can't really say that because it's a spoiler, but
Okay.
Spoilers.
it has a lot to do with the father's history.
Hmm.
It like midway through the book, you find out
Yeah,
something about, yeah, something
Oh,
about the
yeah.
father that, and so I just
Oh.
really based it on the history of that historical character where he was based on, and he is Scottish.
Okay, okay, okay.
So,
I get it.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and also, my I was fan casting it in my head, like, and for the dad, his name's K Warnock, and the fan cast in my head was actually Rory McCann, who is the Hound from Game of Thrones. He played the Hound from
Ooh.
Game of Thrones. So when I was fan casting him, as he's one of my favorite characters because I really, really love him. Ever since he was that funny guy in Hot Fuzz, the Yarp guy in Hot Fuzz. Yeah, I really, really love him as a character and as an actor. And that was the fan cast in my head. So, when I was trying to search my brain for, well, what's really a huge, burly, 6 foot plus Scottish actor, he was the first thing that came to mind. So
Mm.
it basically flowed from there. He was a really good inspiration for his personality as well.
Yeah. No, that itself added, the Scottish accent also added a bit of humor, to it. Because in my mind, I was actually reading it as a Scottish accent. So that was
Oh,
fun.
I'm glad because I was worried. I was worried about like not getting like spelling and context right. I do have a Scottish friend, and I had him read through it just to make sure, like, is this good enough? Is this, like, I don't want to overwrite it as a Scottish brogue, but I wanted to, like, make sure that people are aware that he is talking, like, with a Scottish brogue. And he said, yeah, this is right, but you need to swear some more. He's like, he needs to curse more. And I'm like, there's only so much I can curse when it's a young adult book. So
Nah, you had me when Kay opened a can of beer at 7 a.m. in the morning. You had me there.
well,
um,
that scene was actually, he didn't like that scene, because nobody drinks from a can. He said, take it from the tap.
That was the objection.
Not the 7 a.m.
I'm like, there's no tap in their house.
Yeah. So coming back to King Muddles, I was actually wondering, how much of I mean, this is a difficult question to answer, I realize. How much of reality and fiction do you tend to mix? Because I felt like maybe right in the beginning when I started reading, I felt like Beira was probably, Russia or the Soviet Union, and Avalon, which is obviously a mystical island, but I also thought it could have been Japan, because they had all that spell tech and all of that. So, um,
Well, with Bera in particular, Bera is the kingdom of the Snow Queen, who is the main villainess in the story. And I didn't really think of any particular country, like real world country, when I was writing about Bera, because I was actually basing it primarily on the Snow Queen story. So that vast, like, ice cape that's written in the story, that's basically what I just focused on.
I see.
But for the most part, like, a lot of things in Wicked as You Wish is has a lot of, like, real life counterparts, because I was revising this, like, when I was finally given the ghost, like, when an editor actually said she wanted this book, and I was revising it for her. That was, during the 2016 election in the United States, and I was
Oh.
so pissed off because that guy wouldn't shut his mouth up.
Oh God,
Like,
yeah.
every news was about him ranting his ass off, and I was so annoyed. Like, I was, in a way, doing some petty revenge by writing him into it
Yeah, and I can
for
see
a
it. I
while.
can see it in the writing, because you do mention the detention centers. You do mention the inherent racism in America, which is, I mean, obviously it's reality. For example, Tala says at one point when she has to go interact with her classmates, she says, "I'm pretty sure half of them still think I'm Mexican." And, when Kay says, "I don't have any proper paperwork, but it's all right because I'm white." Yeah.
Well, the surprising thing about it is that my original book, I finished writing the first ever draft of this book in, like, 2009 or 2008, 2009, and the immigration was already in place there. Like, I didn't actually focus on the topic of immigration because of the things that happened in 2016. It was already there because like, one of the number one issues in the Philippines is immigration, and particularly US immigration. We've been having a lot of problems with their Department of Immigration, with ICE agents, long before Trump came into the picture. So, you know, the revisions in my book was just to tweak it to reference the current situation in the United States, which was, getting locked in the border. But this is not this is a very familiar issue with the Philippines, long, long before. Like I've had family who's been affected by this. I've had family who'd been, who'd gotten in trouble because of this. And that was sort of the experience that I was relying on when I was writing it, because immigration, when you read the book, you think these are a lot of American issues, but underneath that is that layer where these are also Filipino issues. Like immigration is a huge Filipino issue for us. Like if you look at almost every country in the world, you'll see that the highest number of immigrants in that country are usually Filipinos as well, because we don't have a lot of opportunities here in the country, where we're forced to go abroad and, you know go through that whole culture shock, that all that adjusting, trying to earn enough money to send back home. And you know when I wrote that book, I intended it to be a Filipino book, and I feel that it's a very Filipino book just for that whole concept of immigration, and that, feeling like you don't actually belong because people look at you differently. And there's a lot of like very Filipino tropes that I added into that, where, you know her mom, Tala's mom, is a nurse. And Filipinos, like, your Filipinos are known for like being nurses and caregivers,
Mm-hmm.
all women that caregiving capacity. And there's that trope as well that, younger Filipina woman and older white guy getting married. It's that thing here in the Philippines, and I wanted to subvert those as well. Like, wanted to show that the sort of a healthier relationship, first of all, between those that kind of couple, and also like that idea where so many Filipino women take on the burden of their partners.
Mm-hmm.
As you like, when Wicked as You Wish, as it turns out, Kay has a lot of issues and a lot of problems, and Tala's mom just sort of weathers through it, because this is something very common with Filipino women. Like it's very common for them to be very practical about who they marry.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I do
So
see a lot of similarities between Indian and Filipino culture. Yeah, you mentioned the people just no privacy, such an Indian thing.
Asian thing, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And yeah, so since I'm a science student, of course, I will ask this question. Uh, I felt like there was this uh, non trivial intersection between science and magic. So, do you think there's a fine line between it, or do you think that magic could also be science, or science could be magic?
that's a popular philosophy in sci-fi and fantasy book, like the sci-fi fantasy genre in particular. That's a very common sort of trope that people adopt, which is basically magic is just something that science hasn't caught up to yet,
Yeah.
or magic is just it's basically science is just magic for more primitive people. That's the whole concept. Like, if you gain enough technology, it's basically magic. It works the same thing as magic. So that's the sort of concept that I took as well and integrated into the work. Because Wicked as You Wish is basically a what if, like an alternate history where fairy tales are an actual part of history. So it with that sort of concept comes with that question of how do you integrate the technology that we already know in the real world
Mm-hmm.
with something like magic. How do you sort of mesh those two? How do you combine those two together? So my take was basically that that same thing, that magic is just super advanced science. And once you've mastered that, it's it's like you're performing miracles as well. So I think the biggest challenge for me while I was doing that world building was trying to integrate all fairy tales into that one universe. So
Yeah, yeah.
this was like my Marvel universe, I guess, where in my head all the fairy tales are in one timeline, in one universe, like all the Asian mythologies and all the Western fairy tales are set in one universe. And that was what makes made it hard, because um trying to make it where the Chinese mythology exists in the same plane as, like things like Sleeping Beauty or Cinderella. It That was the one that took up most of my time.
Mm, mm. Yeah. No, I think it was a really beautiful concept because in general there's always a rift between science and magic, like scientists scoffing at magic or magicians saying, "Ugh, this is nonsense, we are way more powerful than this." So it was lovely to see an integration of the two and a collaborative spirit between the two, if I may say so. uh,
Thank you.
yeah. And yeah, I mean, I really liked like you said, you had Snow White, you had Red Riding Hood. One thing I wanted to mention to you was I really liked your name for one of the podcasts you mentioned, A Brief History of Weird Things. And I think we should also change our name to something like that now. And yeah, speaking of magic, I felt like at some points magic was kind of a symbol or a synonym for something else. For example, you spoke about having different kinds of magic, or class 1, class 2, class 3 magic, and bans on magic of different sort. I felt like there's so many different things in the world that this could mean. It could be gay rights, it could be drugs, it could be anything. So did you have anything like that in mind?
well, the whole my whole inspiration for this particular magic in Wicked as You Wish is actually inspired by this. I'm not sure if you guys have watched it, but I'm a huge anime fan. And there's this anime series called Full Metal Alchemist that sort of deals with this law of equivalent exchange, where in order to produce their version of magic, you have to give up that same amount of magic. So, if you want to bring somebody back from the dead, you're going to have to give up even your life for it to make that happen. So, that's the concept that I try to apply in my work as well, where, like, for example, you can get fire powers, but you can be so affected by the ice from a refrigerator, like the cold coming from a refrigerator. So to the extent where you could freeze to death in front of a refrigerator despite having your fire, like awesome fire powers. That was
Yeah,
one of the examples that I gave in the book.
yeah.
So I wanted to highlight less of the magic and more of the sacrifice. Because as the series goes on, that's what a lot of the focus is going to be when it comes to the characters, what they're willing to sacrifice in order to get what they want. And, uh, I didn't really dwell too much on like drugs and and things like that, beyond saying that there is a there's a black market for things like that. um I did wanted to emphasize that America, as it the royal states of America, which is which is a kingdom in Wicked as You Wish, bans certain levels of magic simply because want they don't want their citizens getting hurt by it, but mainly because they want to control it. And their whole friction with Alex, who is the Prince of Avalon, who is fighting against the Snow Queen. The whole point of them not liking Avalon is because they want their magic patents. Like they want their spell tech, and Avalon refuses to give it to them. And that's the thing that they want in order to get to gain more power, especially under a conservative king like Trump. I'm just gonna say Trump from this point on.
Yeah. And then you have
Yeah.
Tesla. Oops, sorry, I meant Ozra Corp coming.
There's
Uh,
actually one specific billionaire that I want to name, but I am afraid that his fans is gonna flood your podcast because So I'm not gonna say it.
it's all
I'm
right.
not gonna say it. It's like Voldemort. Say his name, they're gonna flood. So Oscar is gonna play a really important role in the second book. Like when you get down to the basics, this book is very anti-capitalism.
Mm.
And the second book is gonna deal with Alex trying to navigate his way around being a king and what that entails. And if he wants equality and if he wants, equality among his citizens, he wants more equity, more like fairness, he has to start thinking about his own status as a royal person in
Mm.
order to accomplish that and all the hypocrisies that can come from being king. So that is the sort of shift in that's a thing, that's a theme that I want more emphasis on when it comes to the second book, because I am very intent on making this an anti-capitalism book, because that is trying to figure out how to make things equal and fair for everybody. I think is an especially important and an especially volatile issue that's happening right now. And I feel that this is my take on it. Like this is what we should be in order to accomplish things like that.
Hmm. Yeah, I ship it. I'm waiting for it, and I'm 100% sure
Unfortunately,
I'm.
it's next year. Yeah, I hopefully very early. I think early next year. The
Yeah.
second book's gonna happen early next year. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
So that brings us to the end of our book related questions. And now
Book.
is my favorite section of all times. It's the stupid question section.
Okay, before we start, I think we should have a rule, right? Like one person asks, then one person, then one person. Otherwise, Ashwini, I know you will ask all your questions.
I have like a list of 14 questions already. So, can we start this section after rejoining? There's 2 minutes left
Okay.
in this.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
And we are back in about a minute or so. I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. And if you have any questions, then please ask.
Okay. I'm back.
Back. Waiting. Paullomi
All
is here.
right. Great. So, do you want to go first, Sanchi?
No, I think I'll let you go first this time. Mainly because of your first question. Your first question is hilarious. So go ahead with it.
Oh no.
Okay, well, my first question isn't actually a question. It's just an observation. So when I heard of your name for the first time, Rin Chupeco, it actually reminded me of soap because there's this detergent brand in India called Rin, and I just can't take that out of my head. I'm really
Oh
sorry
no.
about
Is,
that.
is it a brand in India?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Oh no.
I think I have. Do you want to see?
Oh no.
I'll show it. Wait, I'll show it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Oh no.
No, it's a lovely name. I love it. I'm sorry, I couldn't stop myself. I had to tell you.
It's a staple in India. Everyone knows
Yeah.
your name.
Well, I like it. At least my name's a brand is a
It's
popular
a brand.
brand over there.
Very popular.
That's something.
Yeah, and again, another thing I really loved about your books, I actually started reading the Bone Witch Trilogy, the first book, and I love that you have a dedication to ramen.
There in the entire series.
My heart, right there on the first page, I was ready to cry.
He loved ramen.
Well, you'd be glad to know that I dedicated all three books to ramen.
Yes.
So
Yeah, yeah, I
yeah,
saw.
the
Was
first
it
book
like
is
late
for
night, like
ramen.
working snack?
The first book is for ramen. The second book is for the creator of ramen.
Ramen.
And the third book is for the people of Japan for
Ramen.
popularizing
Yeah.
ramen.
Yes. Thank you, people of Japan. You have my eternal gratitude.
For that and Ghibli movies.
Definitely.
Ghibli movie.
Okay.
Always.
Okay, my turn for stupid question. If you were an Asha, what kind of an Asha would you be, and what would your Hua look like?
Oh no. I would. I mean, the goal is to be like just the regular Asha, not the Bone Witch Asha. And but I would suck so much as an Asha. Like I can't dance, I can't sing, I am not very good at musical instruments. I am not good at etiquette and like entertaining people because I am more likely to like annoy them or antagonize them. Like don't ask me to serve somebody else. If they're horrible people, I'm gonna dump the tea all over them.
I
And
ship that.
like I hope I'd be good at like channeling whatever elements I would be good at. And I would probably be good at fighting, which is but everything else I would make zero money for my ashaka because I can't entertain people unless they're gonna be they want me to be a soldier or something. Then yeah, I guess I could do that. Like I've taken martial arts and I'm mm, passably good at it, I guess. But everything else, like dancing, singing, like ask me to sing only if you want me to kill somebody
Same.
like
You sound like
kill
Polar.
somebody sing.
You sound like Polar. You know that, right? This is exactly what Polar was.
Now that you think of now that you mentioned it, actually, yeah, I that never actually crossed my mind. But yeah, I am probably Polaire. Yeah.
And you'll get along well with the Yadoshins.
I do drink. Like I am I mean, yeah. Yeah, nothing that you said is wrong.
I've read the book many times. And
So
tell me about your Hua. Tell me about your Hua.
uh this probably the simpler the better. Like as like I mentioned this before we started recording, but I bought this really really nice fake doctor mask that I am so in love with. I would wear that. Like if they asked me as an Asha to entertain guests, I would show up wearing that. And like I won't care what people think, even if they complain about it. I really love that mask.
Good choice.
I I mean, for who as simple maybe as possible. Like I would like a lot of magic stitched into them as well, but I don't want it as obvious. And I guess if I'm gonna be a fighter, the fighter kind of Asha, I would like something that won't encumber me when, nothing too tight, nothing too restrictive, I guess. But I don't know. Like I like pretty clothes. I'd wear them on occasion, but I I'd really like to, like, the idea of being a fighting Asha. That's something I'd be more into than entertaining guests and looking pretty.
So you basically want to be a death seeker.
Yeah, yeah. I would actually prefer like their coats and their cloaks and stuff like. Yeah, actually, yeah. Okay, I'm not an Asha anymore. I'm a Death Seeker. You've
Yes.
convinced me. Thank you.
Okay, Paullomi, it's your
Me
turn.
If you don't have, I have more questions.
No, something similar itself. What color do you think your heart glass would be if you were in that world?
Hmm. Well, I feel like, despite not being able to dance and sing, etc., I'd be more useful as the silver. I would assume that a lot of people would sort of gone for the silver, as long as it's not the silver Bone Witch style parts glass, so you don't get into, you don't have the threat of death hanging over your head. And I think silver best suits me because I am a very hands-on person, and yeah, I think that would be more in keeping with my personality as well.
What
As
about
we
you guys?
established,
What
death
about both
seeker.
of you? What
Oh,
would you
I would
go?
totally be an Asha. I have everything planned in my head. So, I feel like I think I would make a great bone witch. Like, what do you think? Do you think I'd be a good bone witch?
I mean, why not? If you think that, if you're not squeamish about bones and blood, and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then, my huas would be, no greens, no yellows, no oranges. Only like in the blue red spectrum, so you'd have like a blue, pink, red, purple, and you have all of those like, zivars with, sapphires, like they go from like big to small, like that, triangular shaped. Yeah, everything's there. I'm an Asha.
Oh
Then if you
wow,
ever
you
need
really
someone,
planned it.
then if you ever need someone to set up a website like Pottermore for your series, I think you should contact Sanchi.
I
She'll
don't know
be
how to
there.
make websites.
She'll be there. She'll make it for you.
I mean, I have this entire thing in my head, like making quizzes. What kind of an Asha are you? What kind of runes can you draw? Who would you choose as your familiar? And like
Oh,
a dating thing. Who would you end up dating in the series?
there was a when the first book first came out, there was a quiz. Like my publisher asked me to create a quiz, like, with what kind of Asha are you? I think it's still around here somewhere. I don't remember where it is, but I don't think they ever like put it down. So it should be in the
We should
internet
take it.
somewhere.
Let's take it.
I'm not taking it. I know. I think I'd make a good Asha because like I can dance, I can sing, and I can play a few instruments. And I don't know about entertaining. And I think I can like fight also if I want to. But like I'll cry after that. But
I think it's back to Ashwin.
yes.
Okay, so I had a small food game I thought would be interesting. Because in Wicked as You Wish, you define a refrigerator as an ice cave with more food and less bears. So I was wondering how you would define other appliances, such as a microwave or an oven or a stove.
For well, first, how about we start with a toaster, like a
Okay.
bread burning bread burning machine. Uh, I would say like a washing machine. That is, like, I mean, the ice cave thing that you mentioned. This is from my character West, right?
Yeah.
Wicked Does Wish has a character named West who is very who has no concept of non-magical technology because he is so used to spell tech that the normal technology is far beyond his comprehension, and he calls refrigerators like an ice cave, or he has to have a refrigerator explained to him as an ice cave because otherwise he doesn't know what a refrigerator is. So like you would explain a toaster to him as crunchy bread maker. A microwave would be a square dragon, I guess, square mechanical dragon, and a washing machine. He would be so overwhelmed by a washing machine, like he'd call it like water magic or something, like a water spinner, or you know.
Yeah, yeah, it could be a water spinner. I remember calling the earth a giant washing machine once. They're very unpleasant memories. Um,
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of food in your books, like, and I think you take food from like almost like every nice cuisine that's out there because I know there's biryani mentioned in the first book of the Bone Witch. I know that,
Yeah,
and then
I
there's
love biryani.
yeah, you do, and Althea
Wow.
makes subs pulao, which is
Yes,
yeah,
yes, yes.
food. I see food everywhere in your books.
I am. I mean, I really love to eat. Like that. That's the thing with me. You don't give me flowers. Don't give me like little gifts that I might not be able to use. Like I appreciate the sentiment, but I might not be able to use it if you don't know me very well. The real way to my heart is through my stomach. Like take me out to a good place to eat. I'm happy with that. Like that's the only thing I want.
I hope your husband is listening because tomorrow.
He is actually snoring away peacefully beside me right now.
Uh, yeah. Okay. Sorry, Sanchi, did you ask a question?
That was a question.
Okay, great. So, Paullomi, your turn.
No, go ahead. I think I'm done with.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
Yeah, so I had
Venugopal
this.
Iyer, please.
Oh God.
Okay. Um, I'll have to give you some context. So, there is this Indian film called Thamal, and there are two friends who are stuck, two brothers actually, who are stuck in the middle of nowhere, and so they're looking for a car. And finally, a car stops, and the driver says, "Yeah, yeah, come on in." And they say, "Do you know how long it'll take for us to reach Goa?" He said, "Well, not really long. By the time I say my name, by that time we will be in Goa." And so they say, "Awesome, okay, this is my name, this is my name, tell us your name." And he says, "Iyer, Venugopal Iyer, Muthuswami Venugopal Iyer, Chinnaswami Muthuswami Venugopal Iyer." And he keeps going on that way. And that reminds me of how West introduces himself in the book as Weston Clifford Bonjour Gretari Bannock Yoni Underways Bright Eye Eddings the Sixth. But you can call me Weston Clifford Bonjour Gret blah blah blah.
Oh, that was a play because my character West is probably the one with the most prestigious lineage of all the characters there, in that he is descended from a lot of famous fairy tale characters, and it's come to the point where he was born cursed because of all those curses that's been handed down from him through generations. And so I figured that that kind of lineage would require a really ostentatious and really pretentious name. And I tried to make it as long as I could. So, that Weston Clifford, blah, blah, bright eyes. I tried to make the name as long as possible. And it's also a sort of fun because some Filipino names they can get really long as well. So
Mm-hmm.
that was my sort of private in joke thing. I know like I think Indian names as well can get very long,
Oh
as you
yeah.
mentioned in
Oh
your
yeah.
story.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
thought it would be fun to sort of highlight that, to to sort of denote that he has a very long and prestigious lineage as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, that was very well done.
Still not a question, but good comparison.
Thank you. I guess if you want a question, well, yeah, I do have a question. Rin, how important are pockets in skirts to you?
Very important. All my skirts have pockets now. Like I've thrown away all my skirts without pockets. Everything else, like there is this there is this online store that I really love. It's called eShakti.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you guys know it, but it's one of my favorite stores to shop at because they will give you pockets. Like if you ask for pockets in their clothes, they will give you pockets.
Oh,
And not
nice.
just like those, it's not like those little small pockets that you can't really fit anything into. It's really like deep pockets. You can fit a person sometimes in some of those pockets. I really love those. So yeah, I think pockets are very important when you're considering your clothes.
Yeah,
Can you
because
fit the firebird in your pockets?
yes, Alex does do that at some point. Well, in
Yes.
his duffel bag, I believe. But yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Pocket.
I remember every time Rin speaks of skirts in Wicked as You Wish, she always mentions in brackets with pockets. So,
I feel very strongly about it. That every skirt should have pockets. Every dress should have pockets.
yeah, I
Yeah,
respect your
we agree.
sentiment.
Do you have any advice for any upcoming writers who may or may not be on this call?
um, I think that a lot of writers suffer from imposter syndrome. Like there's this belief where you feel like you're not good enough, and then you look at other writers around you and you think, well, they're good, I am not, so maybe we may as well give up. And I was at that point many years ago, and I am here right now. So there is this you have to learn to accept that you you need like that the modesty to admit that you can improve, because we are always like I am still improving my writing. My writing's never gonna be perfect, but it's always gonna be better than the last one I did. And you need that balance of humility, knowing that you have so much more to develop, more time, more chances to develop your writing. And at the same time, you need that confidence to know that there are people out there who needs to read your work. There are people out there who is perfectly suited for your writing, regardless of whether you believe that or not. Your belief doesn't matter. There's always fans in the world who will love your writing, and that is what you should aim for.
That, that is strangely uplifting. That someone might want to read what I write
I
because
mean,
nobody likes the dark.
you know what? If you're really into ducks, I have this friend. Her name's Gail. She writes middle grade, and she has pet ducks, and she writes about ducks in her books, and people love her books. So write as many duck stories as you would like.
Ducks
There
are
will
fine.
always be an audience for
Take
The
that,
duck
Ashwini.
being the duck in that D&D episode. You should listen to it, Lynn. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it was brilliantly done because we when we came on call, we were actually planning to speak about Chinese traditional medicine. But then I got another friend with me, and we ended up playing D&D instead. And Sanchi just created the entire game on the spot. And the
On the
first thing
spot.
she thinks about is this annoying talking duck that keeps talking physics.
And wants to marry Ashwini. So
Yeah.
the duck is technically her ex. I
Yes.
had to do the whole thing improv. I had no inkling of what was happening. I was sleep deprived, and then she suddenly like, "Oh, this is a D&D," and I'm like, "Duck."
Now Rin has seen our crazy side also.
Yes.
I mean, if you can get, you can get their attention with a duck in a D&D game. What's stopping you from writing more about it? You should write more duck. Like if you could come up with something so fascinating and so interesting on the spot, imagine what you can do when you actually put them down into words, right? You know, that's my
Thanks.
advice.
Also,
That's my advice to you. Write more duck stories. If you want to write more duck stories, come on, go for it. I'll read it.
thanks.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much, Rin. I'm also feeling very motivated right now.
Marry my duck, Ashwini.
No. Um,
No. Okay, let's move
but
on.
yeah, thank you so much, Rin. I am so glad we had this episode. I really enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to the sequel of. Sorry, I just have
Wicked
so
Ashwini.
many names in my mind right now. Wicked as you wish. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm very
And
much looking forward to it.
I will start reading Never Tilting World. Although it'll complete your books, but then what choices do I have
Um,
now?
I have a few more books in the pipeline right now. Like you will probably hear at least two announcements this year. Hopefully three, because
Ooh,
I
nice.
apparently when there's a pandemic and you're stuck at home and you have high functioning anxiety, apparently you can write a lot of books. At least that's what happened to me. To ease my high functioning anxiety, I just kept writing. So hopefully you get more announcements from me this year. One of them is actually an adult book that I
Oh,
am hopefully next year, I think. Yeah, I can't say much about anything right now, but I'm very proud of the things that are gonna come out, the announcements that are coming out this year, and I hope you guys enjoy those as much as you're already enjoying my books, which I'm very grateful for. So thank you.
Thank you so
we,
much, and we are
You
indeed
have
very proud of you.
yes.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you have like lifetime fans, so we can
Yeah.
we just like half a book of reading, you made a fan of it.
And maybe next year, if we can, find a schedule in your busy time slot,
Oh,
maybe we can do
please,
one more episode with all your new
oh,
books.
please,
Al-
like go ahead. I enjoyed this so
Oh,
much.
Oh,
oh,
thank you.
Also, why did we schedule it with PST if nobody is living in PST?
Oh, I got used to it because I I
okay,
talk with my publishers like this. So
okay,
No,
okay.
because
I talk with
all
my
of
agent,
us.
I talk with my publishers this way. So I'm very used to this sort of time zone.
Okay,
Yeah,
as long
yeah.
as it's not like inconvenient for you, because it's probably later for you than it is for me. Normally, I'm
Yeah.
the most late person in the talks, but
Oh, I
no,
mean,
it's
if you guys can just give me any like date you guys want, because for the most part I'm usually free anyway. So it's not like I'm going anywhere. We're in a pandemic. So it's not, I mean, any date is usually fine with me. Any time slot is okay. So whatever works
it's
the best for you guys. Because I mean, you three need to coordinate. I'm just the one. So
yeah.
So thank you very much, Rin. I enjoyed this a lot, and we hope to see you again.
I hope
One
to see.
Yes.
last, one last thing. If I could just take, if you don't mind, can I just take a screenshot of the four of us?
Oh, sure.
Let me show my hair off, dude.
It's the equivalent of getting an autograph these days.
Let me make sure I don't have bedhead.
Okay.
Ah, okay.
Okay. Three, two, one. All right, got it. Thank you
Whoa!
so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, then. Once again, thank you, and hopefully, we'll see you another time.
Yep.
Thank
Yeah.
you for having me.
Thank you.
I had fun.
If you ever want to talk about like your books and if you want to fangirl, I'm always
Same, same.
Like, if you want to bounce off ideas from that duck story you've got, I'm here.
there. Definitely.
I mean,
That's
I do this. Like I open my emails like for people who have questions about the publishing industry, or if you want to look for an agent, all the steps that you need, all the things the problems that you might have. I always say that my DMs and on Twitter or my emails are open. So if you guys have any questions whatsoever about anything involved in the industry, just send me an email.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
actually have a book draft. I have a book draft that I have to complete in the next 2 weeks. So once it's done, can I send it to you?
Oh sure. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a disclaimer because you like normally you're not supposed to be sending drafts to me because I can be on the hot seat. Like if I ever write anything else that might be similar to yours, my publisher is gonna be mad at me. So
I don't think it's something like, okay, I'll tell you the idea later in the email.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like but
Okay.
concepts or questions about anything in the industry,
Yeah,
my emails are
definitely.
always open. Yeah.
Thank you, Rin. Thank you so much. And I want to make an apology because I at one point said girl in the well instead of girl.
Oh, girl
Oh my.
from the well. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. My brain
Oh,
is
it's
just.
no problem.
Okay. But thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me again.
Good night.
Good night, good morning, and good afternoon, wherever you guys are.
Oh, we stopped recording.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I stopped.
Oh, why can't I leave? Wait.
uh, yeah, sorry. I also wanted to tell you one more thing, Ren.